Yeah, and there they are. Instead, Harold is blown off course and falls into the hands of a fellow named Guy of Artois, a different duke, who enjoys the ransom possibilities and hangs on to him. Harold here is taken, apprehended. Go forward. Harold here is apprehended. That isn't a pistol. That would be too early. I like the little characters that are always down on the bottom. Go forward. Let's see. Okay, he's apprehended. And then William, go forward. William hears about this and sends people to say, I want that guy, because William believes he has a deal with Edward. Go forward. All the nice little details. Go forward again. Here we are. The nuncios, like a papal nuncio, like a minister of William, Willemi, Duke Williams, come and say, I want Harold. The reason he wants Harold is this, among other things. You can enjoy it, as all this is woven, you know. You can enjoy the plows down below. Godwin had remember Godwin? Edward was hopeless as a ruler. He was a very strange man. Godwin, who came out of nowhere, is running the kingdom for him. Godwin's son is Harold. And at one point, Godwin does something. Oh, I remember what it was. And again, it's very significant. This jerk named Count Eustace of Boulogne comes to visit Edward. He is a Norman. He and his men go into a town and demand to be put up in somebody's home. And you just don't do that in England. The guy fights back. There's a big battle, and 14, 15 people are killed. And Count Eustace comes, apparently, as Howard says, their attitude towards Count Eustace was, no damn foreigner can come in here calling himself a count and sit in somebody's home. It was already a heading for this man's home as his castle feeling. Count Eustace demands that they be punished, and Godwin stands up for them, and then he's banished temporarily. Just at this moment, Edward gets the nerve to banish Godwin. Not for very long, but for a while. Just at this moment, the whole thing is timing. Just at this moment, William the Conqueror shows up, a handsome young man in his early 20s who, partly through terror, let's face it, has brought peace to Normandy. And Edward is very fond of handsome young men, fairly young men. I'm not hinting he's gay or anything. That would be an insult to gay people. He wasn't. He just, maybe he sees in him the guy he always wished he could be. And there is no doubt that at this point, since they're distantly related, he drops hints that when he dies, William is going to be the king. William goes home, Godwin is reinstated. There's nothing much Edward can do. He can't run the place by himself. And life goes on. So possibly, though Haworth doesn't go into it, possibly one of the reasons that William is willing to pay some money and get Harold is to firm up this deal. Go forward. Many years have gone by. And he's brought to see William. Go forward. They're both about the same age here. And they take a quick liking to each other. William, I guess, is the kind of guy that, other guys can really respect. And so they go on a campaign together. That is, they go fighting together. Go forward. It's what one does, Harold comes. Keep going. What I like, which is very medieval, is that there's dogs everywhere. So I'm sure Rocky is enjoying this. They go out on an expedition against somebody that William has a grudge against. Go forward. Notice the shape of the shields. Everything is quite accurate, of course. Go forward. And something strange happens in this tapestry anyway. See this arena, which means sand? William apparently falls into quicksand, or is being swept away by one of those rogue waves that we have down at Ocean Beach, and Harold saves his life. At least according to this tapestry, which, after all, is not pro-Harold. They must have heard the story from a pretty good source. Go forward. Keep going. So they lay siege to some place, and they have a high old time fighting. You are allowed, if you're a noble, to surrender, because then your family has to pay ransom for you. So it isn't exactly the death-defying thing that you might think. Go forward. And in celebration, see, dedit Haroldo arma, William ceremoniously gives Harold a suit of armor, which means you're my man now. And Harold accepts him as his lord. All this could have happened. As Haworth points out, the weird coincidences of the future, nobody knew. Harold may have gone along with it, but just to make sure, keep going, William does something very tricky. Oh, here they are in the battle, burning and shooting. Oh yeah, contra Dinan. There are two guys that they're fighting, Dinan and something else. We'll see it. Go forward. Yes. Now they've won and they've gone home. And here is the crucial moment, which wouldn't seem crucial at all to us, where Harold sacramentum fecit Wilhelmo duchi. William gets Harold to swear, very likely, that when Edward dies, he will support William as King of England. And to make sure, see this table that he's swearing on? Inside it, some saint's bones are hidden, which makes it a sacred vow. Even though Harold didn't know that the holy relics were inside. I think it was Saint's bones. Who knows? It might have been a fragment of the true cross that was brought back. They had a lot of that stuff. But Harold didn't know, but when he agrees or whatever, which the Normans choose to call swears, he makes a sacred vow, even though he doesn't know. Go forward. He's sent home, reverse this est, and everything looks fine. Go forward. He comes back to Venidad Edward and tells Edward what has happened. Forward. And then we fast forward a little bit to where Edward the King goes to his church, Westminster, and he dies. Defunctus est. And when he dies, just before he dies, he has a terrifying dream that something bad is going to happen. Everything is going to be in ruins. And later, this is thought to be a prophecy. The Pope later makes them into a saint. And this church, Westminster Abbey, is supposed to become like the central holy place for England. He dies. Go ahead. In great detail, this is our first glimpse of Westminster Abbey. And of course, it doesn't look anything like that anymore, but you get the idea. Great detail. Here, Portara, here they carry the corpse body of Edward to his church, to his ecclesiam. There's something here that's very typical, by the way. You see how tiny these people are, and large these are? This is called hierarchical size. Nobody thinks there's anything strange about it. However important the person is, the larger they are. It was a very old pictorial convention. There'll be Jesus, and he'll be gigantic, and then the people around him will be knee-high, because they're not very important. Forward. And then, here they give Harold the crown of England. The Witenagemot meets. They don't know William. They aren't very fond of him. Harold has been running the kingdom since his father Godwin died. They make him king. And as we've just read in Haworth, when the news comes to William, after I think 15 years of telling everybody he's going to be king of England, he has to cover his face rather than show his shock and shame and embarrassment. He's stuck. He's talked about it, everyone expected it, and now somebody just took it away from him. And remember the world he lives in. It's very much like, dude, you can't let somebody do that. He made you his bitch. I mean, it's just on that level. It's just on that level. I thought William was cool, but Harold made him his bitch. You can't do it. Pretty soon somebody will put a knife in your back. Somebody will get big eyes. Go forward then. And here he is. Remember, this is in France. To the horror of the French, enjoying himself with the scepter and the orb and the crown. Archbishop Stigand apparently is the source for this. And the news gets back to William, you'll see. Go forward. Here, an English boat. Go forward. I think this one's out of order. Go ahead. Keep going. Keep going. I've lost a beautiful slide in here. Sorry, I can't find it. Just at this point, just this moment, let's get the next one on. Something really horrible happens. Halley's Comet appears, but they don't know. Do you remember Halley's Comet? You guys were too little then, of course. But you remember that other comet that came through, I think, don't you? When you were in about 6th grade or so. I remember my son watching it. Well, remember our sky, we can't even see the Milky Way. Their sky, because of the complete darkness, was as full of stars as when you're out in the middle of the desert and it's like wall-to-wall stars, if you've had that experience. This thing with a tail on it, this hairy tail on it, and appears, and everybody knows it must be a symbol of something ghastly. Obviously, it has the French believe it has something to do with Harold. William is told about Harold's disloyalty, and he orders here them to start, keep going, building an enormous fleet to invade England, cutting down all the trees. But it wasn't that simple. William isn't a complete fool. It's an invasion. First, he goes to his boys. It's feudalism. They hold their land, and what they promise him instead of money is that they will fight for him 1 month a year. And each one of his big barons has a bunch of little villages, and each knight in the village holds the village because he will show up and fight 1 month a year, or whatever it is supposed to be, and he must bring with him 1 horse and a suit of armor and a sword. That's how feudalism works. You do something, and when I have a war, you show up to fight for me. Maybe his prestige is already a little shaken. William goes to his barons and says, I think we're going to invade England. And they say, I don't think, they say essentially, it's not in our contract. We'll fight for you here, but we're not going to invade. We're not going to try to get across the English Channel. That's not in the contract. Faith in him is wavering. So now he's forced, instead of having a simple coup d'etat, in which he's just going to kill one man, Harold, take away the crown, now he has to go and hire mercenaries from all over. Remember the spoils? Now he puts out a general call for mercenaries from everywhere. Rich spoils in England, join me. And now he's going to have an occupying force and an invasion. He didn't want it, but there is no way out. No way out. They start cutting down every tree in France, go forward and building boats. It's all described very carefully and very specifically. Go forward. They're getting their suits of armor together. Big invasion being planned. Look at all the spears getting ready, all the helmets getting ready. Porta in the armas. Go forward. And William goes down to the boats. Go forward. And this is where it gets completely weird. Well, I'm running a little bit late, but we'll be done soon. Harold musters his feudal men, and they go to the shore, and they wait. Nobody fights at sea. When the boats are blown over by the prevailing wind, while the guys are unloading the horses, then you attack them, right? Like Saving Private Ryan. There's different theories about that, actually. And he waits. At this time of year, the wind always blows from France. So he has his men sitting there, and they're waiting. And waiting. and waiting. And for the entire damn summer, the wind does not blow. This happened to the Spanish Armada too, pretty much, in a smaller time frame. But William is sitting there, Harold is sitting there, they can almost see each other. Remember, it's just about as far away as Catalina from Newport Beach. And the wind doesn't blow. It reaches the end of the growing season. Now, their kind of agriculture is tremendously labor-intensive for 2 weeks during planting and then for 2 weeks during harvest. It's wheat-based. It's different from cotton or something, where you work all year. It's one of the reasons the North was able to abandon slavery. They didn't want anybody around all year. They just needed intense labor twice a year. But we're getting up to that point. And still, out of loyalty to Harold, who's quite popular, everybody's sitting there, waiting. And then Harold gets the most incredible news, which isn't in here. His crazy brother Tostig, and really Tostig just is cuckoo. Everybody's pretty much agreed about that. Go forward. There's quite a few of these. His crazy brother Tostig has made a deal with one of the Norway kings, Harald Hardrada, which means something like Hardrada, Harold the Hard Man. And if even the Vikings call you hard, you can imagine. He seems to be an absolute fiend. And Tostig is crazy. And they have both just landed up in the north in York. And they're invading. Harold turns around, he's in the south waiting for people to come from France, has a forced march, which nobody believes possible. They march all the way to the north of England, take Harold Hardrada and Tostig entirely by surprise, chop them to bits. And while he's up there and celebrating this tremendous military coup, the wind changes. And it blows William to England. Now these people believe in God. You'll notice in the movie, whenever Henry mentioned God, he always glanced upwards. Because Harold had sworn over a holy record, over a holy relic, even though he didn't know, William, no fool, had gone to the Pope and said, I want this to be a holy war, just like jihad. That is, if you die during this war, you go directly to heaven, because he's violated a sacred vow. The Pope thinks this over and he loves it. He realizes this is new. He has been called in to adjudicate a battle between two kings. This is all sorts of prestige. Remember, I told you back then, the king just appoints somebody a bishop and the hell with it. You know, the Pope is a foreign power. The Pope says, okay, it's a holy war. At this point, when Harold finally has just beaten, he's up in the north of England, and he finds out that the wind changed and it blew William, and William has landed. He must have thought something like, God is against me. There's kind of situations where we would say luck. They said God. They didn't believe in anything like luck. There's a technical term for it, providence. God is actively working in the world. Go forward. And we see the horses successfully landing at Pevensey, while Tostig and Harold Hardrada, go forward, has him occupied. And now, in a tremendous series, the tapestry hastens towards the Battle of Hastings. Go forward. Although first, for some reason it stops, and there's a huge banquet that William is able to give his men because there's nobody defending the coast, go forward. And a bishop blesses it. And there's panel after panel, keep going, of them cooking everything and eating everything, and the bishop blessing it. Et hic episcopus Cuba, he's blessing the food. Odo is with William the bishop, of course, just his brother. And then they've eaten, they've rested, and after marching all the way to York, Harold's troops have raced all the way back to the south, and they're going to fight this force, which has just sat on its ass for the entire summer, has eaten this banquet, and is ready to fight. Go forward. And this is where it starts. Go forward. Burning. No, wait a minute. This is part of the banquet still, I think. They're having a barbecue. See? This banquet goes on for panel after panel. Go ahead. Go forward. And now here we go. Look how stationary everything is. The horse is all poised, getting ready to go. Up here, symbols of two naked wrestlers confronting each other. The battle is about to start. Go ahead. Faster. You can see the speed starting to increase. Forward. 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 And here we start with the lances. Go ahead. And the horse is galloping now, and the archers. Forward. Hitting the arrows, hitting the shields, the mace flying through the air. You really get the feel of it. There's starting to be dead bodies. Forward. The counterattack. Heads chopped off. Forward. The people who did this had listened to people. The guys floating in the water. Forward. And then there's a tradition that William didn't have to fight then, that he could have rested. He didn't have to have the fight then, pardon me, that Harold didn't have to fight then, but that he had just given up. He felt that God was against him. He's not a modern person, and he just wanted to get it over with. Go forward. Forward. I mean, look at this, my God. Forward. Bishop Odo is right here in the thick of the fighting. Stuff flying through the air. Forward. And here, some figures are identified. Haroldus Rex is killed. It seems, as far as we interpret, that he gets hit with an arrow in the eye. That's the tradition. This seems to be him going through the stages of falling down, that kind of cartoon, 4 different panels in one, was a very frequent pictorial device. Go forward. See, coming down. See, this guy seems to have taken an arrow in the eye. That's the famous thing. Down, down, down. And once Harold is gone, they'd been fighting for Harold. The British, the English are finished. There's no further point. They don't have another candidate. Go forward. And the English flee. This here, do you see the naked body here at the very end? And you see a little person there pulling the clothes off? That's a very knowing detail from battlefields. The battlefields would end with all of the amazed and starving peasants, or even not starving, racing over to the dead people and stripping them of their clothes. So that by the end of the day, well, women, children, peasants, all stripping them of their clothes. By the end of the day, all the dead are lying around naked, being eaten by birds and dogs. See? The little person tearing off the clothing. And that's the Battle of Hastings. William moves cautiously on towards London. London doesn't give up right away. And it even manages to get some concessions out of him. But when finally London concedes, he is crowned in Westminster Abbey, where Harold had been crowned first, and then now the first Norman king. He's in a situation, though, where he has to execute all sorts of, it takes him a few years, he has to execute all sorts of Saxon landholders and give it out to these mercenaries. And, wrapping up, he builds the Tower of London. This is when the tower is built, as he said, to overawe the vast and fickle populace. The whole city had been, such as it was, had been wood. And now this big dungeon keep of stone, French stone, they bring it in. Overawes, sitting on its hill, looking down towards the bridge. Great. Okay, then let's stop there.